This is A World on Purpose.
A purposeful life is the most important kind and the most valuable kind of life.
Every choice that we make makes a difference, for better or worse.
I loved walking in a village and seeing the before and after.
This is the podcast dedicated to those humans choosing to live larger by working for the greater good. And these are their stories. Stories of hope and of true change that come from living on purpose.
What if you were to suddenly say there are no challenges, there are only opportunities?
Regardless of where you come from, your financial identity should determine where you end up in life.
I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and my hope is that my inspiring guests will take you on an introspective journey that helps you tap into your own pivot to purpose, bringing greater meaning to your life. Welcome to A World on Purpose. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to A World on Purpose with me, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, your host that's all about purpose. How many of you have been just itching to get out and travel? After the last year and a half that we've had, most of us, some people have been out there traveling, whether it's for work or some people took that brave step in trying to take a trip somewhere because they were just going absolutely nutty being trapped inside for so long. But after the year we have, and now that people are starting to come out of the pandemic and we're starting to get things fixed, there are a lot of people who are ready to get back out on the road, on the airplanes, in different ways, getting out there and seeing the world again and seeing all of the different cultures, all of the wonderful people we have in the world, all of us who've been living in this pandemic together. And so today is really cool because I have my guest on the show, Mr. Michael Schibel, founder of a really unique travel company called Travel with Meaning. And he's going to help you reimagine the way you do travel. So Michael has spent his career, and you're going to learn all about him today. He was actually a top performing talent agent in Hollywood. And he's going to dive really deep into when he realized that he just was not living his life's purpose. When he realized that his job was awesome, gave him a lot of skills, but in his case, it wasn't bringing him the meaning that he was looking for. And he just craved being out there and traveling and being in other cultures and learning all about, different humans in different parts of the world. And so he went out and he did it. He left a very high paying, successful job and went on the road. And through that experience, he's going to share with you how he became this just really unique platform that he created called Travel with Meaning, #Travel with Meaning. And how there are these different ways that we can think about the world from a perspective of when we are out there. It's great to go on vacation and check out and not really think about stuff. But sometimes we can go on trips too, where we actually kind of like integrate meaning and purpose into our lives, which is very, very cool. And he has that as a platform. He started this cool thing called Travel Talks. He then pivoted that into a podcast, also called Travel with Meaning, has really amazing guests like Jason Mraz and a bunch of really cool people who talk about, what does travel mean to you? So I'm really excited for you to hear about him today. He is so enigmatic and fun and a great storyteller. And he's also going to talk about a new endeavor that he is going to get you all jazzed and excited about. And you're going to want to be able to get on the road with this one. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Mr. Michael Schibel, who also happens to be the fiance of a very dear friend of mine, Miss Nicole Landers. And I'm just thrilled to have you on the show, Michael. So everyone get ready to do some virtual travel with meaning. Good day, good morning, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm Alyssa Fisher-Harris, your host of A World on Purpose, and today is a really special day for me. And I've been spending a lot of time bringing these incredible change-making, purpose change-making heroes, I call the ones you don't know but should, that are doing something for the greater good. And I'm really excited because today is a very, very special close friend of mine who is the fiance of a very, very close friend of mine. And I've been wanting to interview him for a while. And so I'm finally bringing him on. He's started this incredible purpose journey. This man lives the ethos of living in a world on purpose with what he created, something called Travel with Meaning, which is a storytelling community around travel. And he also has a podcast of the same name. And you know how much I love to have my guests come on and basically tell their own purpose origin story. And instead of giving you some snippets about him today, he's such a good storyteller. I'm just going to let him tell you about him. So welcome my awesome, awesome guest today, Mr. Michael Schibel, founder of Travel with Meaning. Michael, welcome to Travel with Meaning. Welcome to A World on Purpose. Finally.
Finally, I'm so honored to be here, Alyssa. Congratulations on everything you're doing and just putting change makers and do-gooders in the world out and shining light on them. You're doing an amazing job yourself.
Thank you. Well, you were kind of an example that I followed for a while because you dipped your toe into the podcast world way longer ago than I have done. So I watched what you've done. I've listened, I've learned, and I'm still listening and learning from you because you're doing a great job. And thank you for the kudos, because you know how hard it is to kind of put yourself out there when you're really passionate about something and you're hoping everyone else will jump into the same passion as you. Tell everybody where you're broadcasting from today. I like people to know where everyone's coming from.
Right. Broadcasting today live from Santa Monica, California.
Yep. That's exactly where. My old stomping grounds. I left recently in October, which is really hard to leave all of you guys and your beautiful fiance. Let's do a little shout out to Nicole Landers, my girl.
Shout out.
My sister from another mister, as they like to say. Michael, let's get into travel with meaning. So your story is really cool. And I'm super excited for people to hear it because I believe the origin of what you've done, I truly believe, is kind of where sometimes people feel those moments in their life when they're in something and it might not feel like the right fit and they feel stuck. And what do we want to do in terms of taking a risk and really stepping into what our purpose is and finding and learning out what that purpose is. And so your story is pretty awesome. I would love for you to start sharing your purpose origin story with us, all about your background and what you used to do and how all of that brought these learnings to you in intersecting in this great community around travel called Travel with Meaning.
Okay. That's such a big question. And I'm really honored again, just to have this opportunity to share it with you. Before I even get into kind of the origin story, I wanted to share travel for me had always been instilled in my life through my mother. My mother, to this day, she's turning 80 in just over a month. She'll always say she's packed and ready to go on an adventure. And I saw that growing up. And I grew up in a privileged lifestyle. I was able to travel. It was instilled in me, like I said, through my mother. But I always had that wanderlust feeling. And maybe it was from her, and maybe it was just that desire to see the world. And I ended up traveling right after high school. After talking to a lot of my friends in high school about, let's go on this big trip, let's do things. Nobody else wanted to go. Nobody wanted to do things. And so I took that opportunity as stepping outside my comfort zone and going on a trip and going to Europe for 18 days. I joined a little tour there, and that trip really kind of led me off in this whole path of where I am now. It started my initial adventure into travel and really transformational side of it, and where we are today.
And you took that journey. I mean, you literally were like, okay, I'm just going to do it. There's nothing stopping me. I'm going to try it, figure it out. Did you pre-plan it, or did you just go with the flow and let the wind take you wherever it may?
Yeah. So that initial trip, I did plan a little bit, meaning that my mom helped me. This was like me graduating high school and my parents saying, "What do you want?" And I wanted to see the world. I wanted to step outside my comfort zone. I grew up, again, acknowledging that I grew up in a privileged place in Southern California. And I recognize that, but I had this longing for wanting to experience the world, meet new people, see things, right? See what else is out there. And I can vividly remember saying, yes, I want to go, and knowing that nobody else is going with me, and being nervous and excited. And there's that excitement and there's that thing that happens for you when you come back from travel, once you survived, right? And so that was my first initial really big building block. Growing up, my parents did take us traveling. So I had that experience and reference from a family perspective, but starting off on my own, that laid the foundation to build onto my life. And from there, I did like a lot of people. I went to college. I got the job that you're supposed to do. I spent almost a decade in Hollywood as an agent and manager and doing the hustle on that side. And it was very Jerry Maguire, very Entourage on a lot of levels, and I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was wearing the suit every day. I was in the office by 7 a.m. I was crushing it. Whatever I needed to do, I based my happiness on if my clients were getting work, if, what was happening with them. And through a series of things happening in my life, getting divorced, losing clients who were really important to me, I was lost. And travel once again showed up for me as far as an opportunity to find myself, figure out what that purpose would be. And I bought a one-way ticket. I bought a one-way ticket with no plan, not knowing anyone, and figured it out along the way.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit though about before we get into like the trips and how that happened. You know, you touched on earlier this idea of white privilege, and that's talked about a lot. And you know, you and I are both in the space of really wanting to bridge the gap where there is social injustice, racial injustice, all of that. I did not grow up white privileged. You guys know that. You guys know my story. But I've been lucky also to have been able to find a way in my life to come into that. And so when you decided to make this trip as a young kid though, and you grew up in this way, this community that you like to describe, when you decided to take that trip, and then I want this to kind of segue through all the work that you just talked about, you did as an agent and everything. Did you have this instilled desire when you say you wanted to see the world and meet other people to understand really what other cultures experience and what other cultures go through because of that lens that you grew up with?
That's such a great question. Yes, and the reason I say that is I believe there was the underlying interest and desire. Now, from that first initial trip to Europe, maybe all of it wasn't discovered. Maybe there was only like small scratch had really been itched. But what I started finding was the curiosity had completely been just let loose. And so from further travels after that, and from further exploration after that, I was just wide open to that conversation of wanting to learn, wanting to appreciate, wanting to spend time with not just locals, but other travelers, right? So you get to meet, that's one of the most beautiful things about traveling is connecting with not just locals, but other travelers from around the world. And when you are traveling, you are so authentic, right? I like to say that traveling allows you to be your true authentic self. So I grew up in the Palisades in a very, white privileged neighborhood, but yet I meet someone who's grew up maybe on the low income side from Belgium or somewhere else, but they're traveling and we're connecting on life and other things. And we're discussing whatever life could be while we're also interacting with locals. You then create this whole opportunity of what inclusion looks like. And so to answer your question, yeah, my growing up, I didn't have the understanding of it maybe as I do today as far as the privilege side. It kind of was what it was. Right. But the travel allowed me to appreciate, be acknowledged, but then also realize that like there was more to learn and experience. And one thing I will say that I've experienced is that, and maybe you have as well, and I'm sure your listeners have as well. If you go to, let's say, like a third world country, right? And you see someone who maybe on paper, let's say, or what we deem to be having things, doesn't have much, but they're the happiest people in the world, maybe just sweeping the street or whatever it is, you start to understand the clear feeling of what gratitude could be, or what just being present can be, just from those moments of where you are in that world and where you are in that interaction with that person, right? So those experiences, coming full circle to your question, like really laid the groundwork for me to like start looking at my trajectory in travel and growing up and how I want to be, but then more importantly, how I want to then support and how I've been able to grow, blossom, transform, and how my passion and my purpose has turned into wanting to create that lens for others.
Right. I agree with you. I think too, that helps us understand, it's really easy in life to focus on the things that you don't have instead of what you do have. And so by being able to have those experiences and see the gratitude that people have in other parts of the world, like you said, from an outside perspective, might think, someone might think they are lacking. Maybe they are or aren't feeling that way, but they have a sense of gratitude, and we need to learn how to have a sense of gratitude for where we are and what we have. And I do think travel does help awaken that in people.
For sure. And, and I'll say this, like, sometimes when you travel, and I'll take this is like full, like me, vulnerability travel, like I have gone places, and not even just the expectation. I've gone places with, after maybe I left my career as an agent, and maybe I had higher expectations. Maybe I liked things a little better. Maybe, you know, I thought of myself a little differently. But that travel allows you to be on that even playing field if you're open to it. If you're experiencing those conversations with those locals and wanting to see it. If you want to hide away in your resort and just say you traveled and you're a tourist, that's up to you. Mm-hmm. If you're that person who wants to be open to whatever that's really going to be and look for that transformational opportunity to grow, you're going to stay in a hostel, or you're going to stay and talk to locals, whatever those experiences are going to be. And I definitely went through moments of complete transformation, of stepping way on the other side of my comfort zone, like to the point of, you know, sleeping in cars for days, or doing things that like I traditionally would have never done, but now have felt like, okay, I want to then be able to experience more people so I can have a better understanding of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think that's true. I think there is a choice on how you want to travel. And I know for me, I've always wanted to be where everyone local was, like, you know, stay in the local hostel or the local community center or the local, I mean, it's not that I haven't stayed in nice hotels and places too, for sure I have, you know, and it's okay. We don't want to like vilify anyone for how they choose to travel. I think it's great.
Wait, I want to just really quick on that point. I think that's a really interesting point you just shared. And I think it's important for us and for your listeners and community to talk about. Travel is the most personal thing you can actually really do. Mm-hmm. Right? It is a very personal thing. And the judgment on how people travel, I think is a shame. Now, again, if somebody chooses just to go plop themselves down at a resort for a week, I can't sit there and be like, you're not really traveling. Maybe that person works their tail off all year and this is what they're choosing to do.
Right.
And maybe they're finding a way to recharge or whatever it is. Good on you. That's, to me, but by the way, that's where the meaning comes in with meaning of travel with meaning, which I know we'll get into. So I don't want people to look at the judgment of travel as like how you should do this, how you should do that. Again, if you're open to it, if you're creating conversations, if you are inviting people to try different things or to go meet others, that's part of the journey. We're all traveling different, but it's the most personal experience you can really have.
I completely agree with you. And I think that's awesome that we can point that out. And to the meaning part, we'll get in that in just a minute. Let's talk about, I love that name so much. I think it makes so much sense because it does give kind of a different thought process in how you're thinking about how you're planning your trips and your travel. And we're going to talk also about how COVID has affected, you know, that whole, not just the travel industry, but anyone's idea who used to travel a lot, like who's missing that. We're going to touch on that a little bit later, but the meaning part. So this is on the show here. We like to help people understand that when they're in a profession, they're doing their work. Sometimes it's already fulfilling and inherent in what they do, which is great. And they're looking for additional things to bring greater meaning to their life, right? Which may be tied into their career, maybe tied into something external. Could be this travel thought of traveling with meaning. But also sometimes people are in a job maybe where it isn't fulfilling and it isn't their purpose. And they're trying to find another avenue that's going to bring them greater meaning in their life. And what is my purpose? Why am I here? And so if you could just talk for a minute about for some of those folks who might be in that place where they're thinking, gosh, you know, I have a great job. On paper, it looks awesome. I should be super happy, but I'm missing my purpose. You experienced that as an agent. And that was your like biggest career. You were like at the height of your career, like you said, crushing it. What was that pivot, that aha moment for you when you realized, man, this isn't it for me? Like, there's something greater. And then you've pivoted and figured out that it was travel with meaning.
Yeah. To answer your question first, as far as other people who are feeling that, the advice I would say is take a trip. And that could be an afternoon getaway. That could be something, just change your space, right? That's the kind of shifter in the transformational conversation, just to open yourself up, whatever that would be. And I know we're going to dive into that in a second. As far as for me, like I can vividly remember the exact moment this happened. I had two clients of mine who I were very, very close with, and I was working my tail off. And I really in my mind, this was like, this is my path. This is my next 5 to 10, 15 years. We were going to, sell TV shows, do big concert tours. They were musicians. They were TV hosts. This was my paycheck. And we were in a self-help workshop. We really were. I was with my clients. I really was.
Interesting.
It was very new agey, right? Very spiritual, very much so. I had completely dove into the Cafe Gratitude community, and this is actually a landmark course. We were in a landmark course.
Oh, yeah.
And if people don't know, a very self-help type of workshop, finding your passions, your everything. And I was with two of my clients, and we had actually broken up into a group, and I was sitting with my two clients, and we talked about finding happiness. And my one client referenced, if their band had a number one hit and they toured the world, they'd be happy. My other client said something about, if they got a TV show and did X, Y, and Z and toured the world, they'd be happy. And my mind, and when I answered, if you got this and you got this, I'd be happy.
Wow.
And what happened for me over the course of the next several months was, several months, I realized that I was basing my own happiness, my cup being full, on other people's success and other people's happiness, which is really what a career of an agent or manager is on some level, right? I loved it. I was good at it. I appreciated it. I just adored a lot of aspects of it. I had no freaking clue who I was, right? I had no clue who I was. I was so lost. I'd just gotten divorced like a year earlier, and that was a show of a marriage in the first place. I should say this, not that it was a show of a marriage. I probably wasn't ready for it. I thought, again, this is what you do. You get married and you do this. We probably, as a couple, weren't ready for it, and we tried to, and hence why it didn't work. But for myself, I saw these conversations with my clients as kind of like, ding, who are you? And I guess the writing was on the wall. Months later, both of those clients, both of those opportunities were gone. They both had parted ways with me as their representative. And like, I was more devastated about breaking up with my clients than I was about my marriage. I believe so much more in my clients than my marriage. And what had happened from there is I had a little tailspin. And again, I can really remember telling someone, I need 72 hours to figure some stuff out. I drank a ton, probably smoked too much, ate too much, and just was like, I need to numb myself for a second. I knew that I would come back and be clear-headed. And from there, I just got to the space of saying, okay, what is my moment? Where do I go from here? Here's my crossroads, right? I'm devastated of what I thought my career was look like. Do I stay here in LA and continue to hustle this grind and look for new clients and, do the schmoozy LA agent thing, which I could have. And I thought about hardly, this is what I'm supposed to do. But I didn't want to, because I didn't think that was really going to fulfill me. I still didn't know who I was. So I started looking up online, where should I go? And I pulled up all these different opportunities of places to go travel. And I found a one-way ticket to Australia for like super dirt cheap.
Wow.
And I just bought it. I didn't ask permission from anyone. I didn't talk to anyone. I remember I called my mom like a day later. And I was like, hey, I bought a one-way ticket. And she's like, well, what does that mean? And I was like, I have no idea, but I'm going to go find whatever's out there.
Wow. Wow. That is so powerful. I'm like, literally, I don't know if I'd have the guts to even do that at my aha moments. Michael, that is so cool. I want to dive deeper into that experience now, because you shared some stories around when you were on that trip and sort of some other ahas that happened during that trip that helped you come back and segue into this travel with meaning. And this is the part where we just take a quick break. Our guests we love them to go get water, drink water, or breathe on purpose. And we will be right back with Michael Schibel and Travel with Meaning. Okay, so we're back with Michael Schibel, founder of Travel with Meaning. And Michael, earlier before we took the break, you were just telling us this really incredible story around how you had this epiphany as an agent with your clients, realized that this was not fulfilling for you. This was not your dream. And you bought a one-way ticket to Australia and didn't tell anyone and just went for, and I'd love you to, before we get into how you came to travel with meaning again, which I love so much. Tell us about that trip specifically. You were on it for quite some time, and what came about for you as you had those experiences that sort of made you realize that this is where you needed to pivot in your life, that your life and your mission was about bringing more meaning through travel?
Yeah. Well, first off, just to go back for a second, I did tell people. I'd purchased the tickets and then started sharing with my family and friends that I was going. I had a big garage sale. Like I kind of ceremoniously had a ramp up.
You didn't disappear.
I didn't disappear, but I do want to also bring this up, is that this was very early social media, and that'll come back in this conversation. And I bring that up because what I'm going to share in my experience, what I did is this isn't revolutionary. A lot of people have done this. This is my journey, right? So this is what I've done. And so this is why it's special to me. But I want to share that there's no social media for the fact that it seems to be documented so much more these days.
Right.
And so I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I booked like a hostel for 2 nights, the first 2 nights I was there. And I got there, and I think day 2, I freaked the fuck out. I was kind of like major breakdown of, and here's what I'll say. One thing I committed to doing with myself along the way was recording everything. And why? People like to journal and they like to do their things. I do journaling more now, but I have a hard time reading my own handwriting. I'm a very sloppy writer, and journaling, I think, is wonderful for therapy, is for the own personal self. And it's wonderful just to let stuff out. And I do it now for that. But for the purpose of wanting to share what was my exact feeling in the moment of the trip, I recorded vlogs before they were vlogs, my check-ins, as I was calling them.
Wow.
And so I was doing it everything from the moment I landed in Melbourne to like, okay, I don't know what's out there, to the second day of like, I don't know where to go. Like I want this to be like crazy party and meeting people. And I was like, holy, what do I do? So
were you recording this on, that was before iPhones and stuff. How are you recording all of this?
Yeah, that's the funny aspect. So do you remember Flip, the little flip cameras? Yeah,
of course.
So when I went, I did have an iPhone, like, I don't know, 2 maybe with me. But there was nowhere really to put this, maybe Facebook, right? There was no Instagram at the time.
Uh-huh.
But I was recording 90% of my stuff I had 3 flip cameras, 1 Kodak camera. And I literally was like walking around, like, I guess now thinking about it, like super touristy. I had like cameras on me, and I was constantly just talking to myself of like, here's what I'm feeling. Okay, where should we go today? But it was very helpful for me, very therapeutic for me. Mm-hmm. And so what actually happened by doing that was, one of the biggest aspects of this trip was being solo. You want to meet people. Mm-hmm. And one of the best ways I found to meet people was you start talking to them. And what I was doing was I was asking questions. I was curious as I started finding us as travelers, as I got into my flow of the travel, whether it's staying at hostels or going to places, you start meeting travelers. And I was just fascinated with where people were from and how alike people really were. We all had, no matter what your background was, we all had these same central themes of what we wanted for ourselves, our families. To be appreciated, to be loved, to have health, to have abundance, to have success, to have all these little things. And I started seeing that and feeling it. So I started asking people questions, the same 3. What inspires you? What are you grateful for? And what does travel mean to you? I had no idea what I was doing with any of this stuff. Part of it was my way of like being like an awkward solo traveler and like trying to talk to people. Yeah, it was, but kind also
like self-therapy.
Can I just ask you a question? And I was doing it in the most random places, in the middle of a pub, in the middle of a hike. And like, part of my mind also was like, ooh, this is good content. Like maybe I do something with it. I was still in that agent mentality.
Right.
Good or bad. And that had a big effect on me on that trip, because I was always kind of agenting a little bit. Like, I ended up when I came home from that trip, I had a development deal with a hostel, because I love the hostel. I was like, we should do a TV show with them, as opposed to enjoying the moments. I was like, this place is awesome. Let's do a deal. Why? So, but those, it was really funny. But those conversations with people really did something for me. Like, it allowed me to share more, because as I even mentioned earlier, like, you become so authentic when you travel, especially with some dude you've never met is asking you like really deep questions, you know, and most of the time when you're traveling, it's a lot of surface and, you know, where are you from? What's going on? How long are you here? But I'm like, what are you grateful for? What inspires you? People would tell me things that they weren't expecting, and they were so surprised that they would say. And I remember vividly, like early in the trip, I was at this pub in the middle of the outback, like nowhere. It's called the Daily Waters Pub. Wow. And like, there's nothing around. And I asked this one random, these two ladies that were traveling together. I feel like they were from Texas or somewhere. And I just asked them, what are you grateful for? And the lady said that I have the ability to do this, that a few years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare disease and never thought I would live again. And to be here with my friend, to experience life, to meet people. Like, we were all bawling at the end of this conversation. And it was these moments that really just stirred a lot of things inside me.
Well, I mean, that is deep, right? I mean, talk about having a sense of gratitude. That's about as deep of gratitude as you can have, just to be here and be healthy. And I love that that became kind of a form of therapy for you, and that you had found this sort of space inside yourself where you're like doing something new and different, but at the same time, you're still kind of leveraging some of your back skills and trying to figure out how that's actually been helpful to you in founding Travel with Meaning, which is great, because we don't want to ever discount what we learn in the jobs and careers that maybe we didn't think were fulfilling, because we learn something from every single thing we do, right? It's important. It's part of our building blocks of who we become. So let's talk a little bit about that now, because I love that you had that journey and that you vlogged all that stuff early before there was really anybody doing it. And I mean, now, you know, everybody's got their selfie sticks, so it's not an unusual thing, but you must have certainly stuck out a little bit back then. But that's kind of fun, because you were a conversation starter too. So Travel with Meaning, like, how did you get that idea? So from obviously your experiences and what you were learning, where did the name come from? And tell everyone how it started, because it didn't start with the podcast or with this big platform or with all these great travels and trips that we're going to talk about that you do. It started just something very simple. And then you were able to kind of leverage all of your talents as an agent into building this really cool platform and experience that you've created now. Yeah.
So as part of this trip that I had taken, right, buying the one-way ticket, which I had called My Grateful Journey. And I'd set up the blog and vlog to go with it, where I was putting everything. Part of that, and going back to these agent skills, I was in New Zealand. And at the time I was in New Zealand, I was on a tour bus. It's a hop on, hop off tour bus. And again, kind of back to these agent skills. I liked it. I thought it was great. But on one of these trips I was on, I stared at a TV for like 5 hours on the bus with nothing on it. And I was like, these guys are missing an opportunity to share content with their customers and have their customers share things, blah, blah, blah. And I had shared that with our bus driver. And he's like, why don't you call the owner of the company? Here's the number. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I got the guy on the phone. I literally just first time I got him on the phone, and he was like, I don't know who you are, but hey, we're launching a new business in Asia. Do you want to go to Asia? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Cool. So he's like, reach out to me in 3 months. All right. I did that in 3 months, and they sent me to like Thailand and Laos, and I created a lot of content for them. And I mean, this is 2010. And that content ended up running in like tour agency offices and their offices all over Australia, New Zealand, and Asia to sell trips. Kind of what I was sharing for them to do.
Cool.
So what had happened from there is I then, after my trip, my grateful journey had completed after almost a year, kept in contact with these people, and they offered me a job. They offered me a job and brought me back to New Zealand. And I'm getting to where like the concept even from travel with meaning comes from. Because it was actually something that one of these, the owner of the company in New Zealand had kind of said in passing something about having meaning when you travel. And I was back in New Zealand doing some research for them on a social media campaign that we were working on. That was could be called like the greatest job in the world, which unfortunately never came to fruition. But I was on one of their trips and we were doing a very famous hike in New Zealand called the Tongariro Crossing. That's like a 12-mile hike, and you pass by like volcanoes and this incredible trek up to this like Emerald Lake. And at one point I stopped and I looked around and there was nobody else around me. And I had my flip and I was recording, and I literally had this moment of, I want people to have and share extraordinary experiences, because I believe the more we pay it forward, no matter who you are in the world, something will happen for you. You'll transform. It's that experience that you want to go and have and come home and be fired up to want to make a difference in your community, in the world, whatever that is, because you've now experienced incredible nature, different cultures, other people, that you're now open to all these things. You didn't just read about it, you went and did it. And so if I look at travel with meaning, it's evolved a lot, but that moment and that experience on that trip and my aha moment of having and sharing experiences was kind of the whole precipice of like what I believed in. It evolved into other people sharing their stories that really impacted their lives and their careers, maybe untold stories they've never told. But it was that moment that I wanted to like share it so much with people to like, as my mission statement is now, encourage, inspire, and support through that. Right. And we see that in social media, how like people's content, there's FOMO. People are like, oh, I wanted to go on that trip because I saw you do it. But did you want to go because it was like super inspiring and encouraging, or you just had FOMO? And my whole mindset was that authentic space of like, this shit is incredible. Like, I cannot believe where I am. I want other people to do this. I want them to feel as lit and excited and as grateful as I am in this moment. And so that was kind of like the jumping off point.
Right. And then you took, so, I mean, that's cool. I guess I didn't even remember that you had been hired by that company, and I'd forgotten that. That's so awesome. You were sitting there watching the television being like, this is a missed opportunity. I love that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I can look at that now and say, like, I'm grateful for that. There are times, especially during that trip or even in my grateful journey, that I wish I would have chilled out more, right? I'm calling myself out on like, I was always on the hunt for Wi-Fi. I still had a couple of clients and things I was doing back in LA that, kept money coming in that would be awesome. But I look at those experiences on that trip, and from then to now, how I have been able to disconnect more and more each time. That time was like trying to pull the umbilical cord of your cell phone and your Wi-Fi away so fast. After being a agent in Hollywood for like 10 plus years, or manager for 10 plus years, to them being like, good luck on your travels. Now, I know people nowadays are like, yeah, I'm detox, I'm disconnecting. I was doing that, but I was also very much still checking in and like very much still trying to find Wi-Fi to a fault. And I'm calling myself out on that bullshit. Like, I wish I didn't look for it as much, but to your point. Yeah. So that hustle allowed me to get that guy on the phone, which allowed me to go to Asia because I didn't have that plan, and then turn to a great relationship and going back to New Zealand.
Right. Which is great. But I do think it's wonderful that we're going to talk about that a little bit in segment 3 in terms of the parts I like to talk about where we have challenges and difficulties and the tools and tactics we can use to be able to really do self-care. And when we get into it, obviously travel with meaning isn't just having the experience, but it's also being present in the experience, which is that disconnection that you talked about, right? So we'll touch on that in part 3 for sure. And before we take a break though, let's get now into actual travel with meaning and how you started it, because it didn't start as a podcast or as a vlog. It actually started with in-person experience. So tell us about the travel talks.
So Travel Talk initially started for the standpoint that I had all this content for my travels and I wanted to do something with it. I wanted to bring like-minded travelers together. But my mind and my vision was always like, I'm going to share my content. Ego, my stuff's so great. I want people to see it. What I quickly realized was it's the we, not the me, right? I do think some of my content's cool, but maybe it's also because it's personal, right? It's my stuff. But what I quickly found is that no matter who you are, Alyssa, you could be a CEO, you could be a famous actor or an athlete. We have really nothing in common on some levels professionally, right? I'm not the most athletic person. I'm not whatever I could be. But if we talk about going to Australia or Italy, we can bond over this conversation. Now, we've had completely different experiences, but there is a central conversation that we can now start having. And I noticed that. And what happened was I became incredibly curious to hear everyone's travel stories. Was there that moment like I had that transformed me? Now, the thing that transformed me was wanting to hear other people's stories, right? There's a great Einstein quote that super resonates with me. I have zero talent. I'm only passionately curious. And so
that's awesome.
For me, that's what it became about. And I started utilizing my network of interesting and extraordinary people and saying like, I want to hear your story. Like, okay, you're a Grammy-winning musician. Like, what did travel do for you? And that was with Jason Mraz. And I was like, so let's talk about it. Let's talk where travel is. And he was a perfect example of someone that said, like, I didn't want to do your podcast. I didn't look at travel that way because for me, travel was work. But he said, by having these conversations with you, I realized how much travel has not only transformed me, but it also has contributed to so many other people's lives. So I start having these live talks. We start bringing the other community. This is almost 5+ years ago now.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And something was happening. Something was happening where it was community really authentically coming together to hear these guest stories, mingling amongst themselves to share stories. We had great raffle prizes. We had,
I was there. I was at quite a few of those.
Probably even won a raffle prize.
I think I won one.
Yeah. But it was fun. And it was more than anything, like I was still hustling my ass off looking for work and trying to figure stuff out. But there was something that I was so drawn to, the purpose of what this was and what this truly is, in the belief that I have that travel is that connector and that bond for all of us, no matter who you are in the world. It's that level playing field that really has impacted us. It's introduced us to new people. It's created new experiences. And there's something that probably has happened that's had that huge impact to your life, your career. And I want to hear the story. And along the way, it was just trying to share this with people and hearing people saying, oh, nobody wants to hear other people's travel stories, or, oh, like, when are you going to stop doing this, or blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't know. And I kept saying, why would I do that? Like, I love this. So that's where the kind of, I guess, not even roller coaster, I was going to say, where the path started with travel with meaning. And I want to talk for a second just about meaning. Can we talk about the meaning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you really keyed in on something that when you said, it's such a great name and it's such a great word, the meaning side of it. And one thing I knew to be true is when I started this, a lot of people said, who's going to want to listen to people's travel stories? And when I said the name, people were like, oh, I really do like that. That feels good to me. But everyone asked me the same question. What is meaning? Right?
What's the definition of meaning? Right.
Yeah, and I'll never forget this. I had like a major travel CMO. And I had been doing this a couple weeks maybe. And he was like, well, but what is your meaning? And I just looked at him. I said, what do you want it to be?
Yeah.
And he was so confused. And I said, listen, this is where travel is personal. You go to Italy, I go to Italy. We have different experiences, but that meaning we create is special to us. How we do something with that is the bigger conversation. So I started looking at this capsule of what meaning is and how we get to create the conversation around it and what it does for people. And one of my favorite things in my podcast or in general is asking people what travel means to them and hearing that question. And when you think about it, especially after the year we had with COVID and the appreciation of what it is, and getting people to like think about things that they don't normally think about that have had such impact, purpose, and meaning in their life is pretty freaking tremendous.
It is pretty freaking tremendous. And I love that. It's the same thing with me, creating this show around purpose. What is purpose? Purpose is what it means to you and how you're going to walk on that path of purpose in your own way. And so that's a great segue for us to take a quick break because we're going to come back and dive into now the podcast. And I want to talk about what you've been experiencing with your community that you've built, a really great community of people who are excited about this. You're going to get a bunch of naysayers when you start something. You're going to get people asking you why this, are people going to wanna blah, blah, blah. And you did it and you built this great community. And so we're going to talk about that and how the lack of travel this past year and a half has really affected the community and people who are used to being able to take that as a path in their life of bringing greater meaning. So we'll be right back with Michael Schibel. We're going to dive into all of those great details and some other cool things he's going to talk about that he launched this year that you get to be involved in. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back with the ever awesome Michael Schibel, founder of Travel with Meaning. And Michael, I've always loved your energy. First of all, for people who haven't ever met you or been in your space, I have to say, when you started the Travel Talks, and now we're going to talk about your podcast, I could see why you would have been a great agent. You're such a people person and people gravitate towards you and they love you and you're excited and animated. You ask really intelligent questions. You did that all with Travel Talk. And then you segued that and said, hey, I think I'll start a podcast like all of us are trying to do now, but you did it before. So let's talk a little bit about the Travel with Meaning podcast because, I personally am experiencing that journey now. It's not an easy journey, but it's fun and it's rewarding. And I'm the same as you, like to tell these people's stories is what I live for. So how did you start it? You've grown this awesome community around it. You have a great following and now it's led to all these other things that we're going to talk about. So let's start with the podcast.
Yes, the podcast really just came from the Travel Talk live events. And I guess potentially I should have just started that earlier and I could have been dual recording both the whole time, but I love the aspect of bringing the live community together. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to start the podcast as a way to really expand community and let people who weren't seeing it live to hear the conversations around the world. And it's the same format conversation being that looking for those travel stories that have impacted people's lives and careers, the things that have moved, touched, and inspired them. What is their meaning? What does travel mean to them? And we're at, I don't know, I think it's like 59 episodes and counting currently.
That's amazing. Wow.
Get grateful. Listen, when you look at a lot of people out there with their numbers and I'm just grateful. Could I be doing more and doing faster? Sure. But I do my best to have these conversations I have, and I'm super picky sometimes about who I put on the show. But what I find, and this is, I guess, big kudos to why I love what I do, is I get to have these really intimate conversations with people about their travels. And again, travel's so personal. Mm-hmm. And I forget, and then I'll put it out in the world and somebody reach out to me and be like, that was an incredible tale that I just heard. Like, I don't know, there's a couple stories really just resonate with me. Like Jessica Blotter, who started a company called Kind Traveler, the first ever give-get hotel booking platform. Mm-hmm. So they are not only just, you can, when you book with them with incredible hotels around the world, but you're supporting a local nonprofit. But her story and the origin story, where that came from, was being on a trip in Belize and seeing emaciated dogs that led her to want to say, how can I do something better than just travel? Mm-hmm. And so that led her down this path of launching Kind Traveler years later. Or Laura Greer, who is a renowned photographer for Nat Geo and had been to Peru dozens and dozens of times, mm-hmm. and is a big hat aficionado, and realized that, her love for hats, and was on a trek in the Andes, and her love and passion for Peru and wanting to help the indigenous women there from there led to her wanting to launch this hat company that she has now, Andiana Hats.
Yeah, it's so cool.
So those two stories. And then oh my God, even someone like Ben Higgins, the guy who was The Bachelor.
Yeah.
First off, I had no idea the dude was even The Bachelor before he was on my show, which makes me seem like I didn't do my research. When we first met, I didn't know he was The Bachelor. When he was on my show, I did.
Yeah.
But he told me a story how he was 14 years old and went to Honduras with his church, and how that experience coming from his little town in Indiana, seeing poverty in Honduras rocked him to his core. That he stayed so connected to that community through his years that one of his best friends launched a nonprofit so they could do stuff there. He, after he gained all his success in doing things, launched a for-profit company as a social venture to then, again, still give back to that community. So those are just examples of these travel stories that I still look at as like, how lucky am I? Like I'm just a guy trying to figure it out as a traveler, but like, I want to hear these people's stories so I can share with others so they can also get out there and find where their meaning is.
Yeah. And I love that too, because that's, that goes back to sort of what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, it's okay to take a trip just to unplug and check out, and not when you've been working really hard, and not have to necessarily do something external or for humanity or anything like that. But travel definitely can lead to that. It can lead to that awakening inside of you where, oh my God, you see something you never thought. And suddenly it's like, what can I do to make a difference? How can I help influence change? Right.
Wonderful example of that is Zim Flores. Zim Flores is a phenomenal woman, entrepreneur. She started a company called Travel Noir. Travel Noir still is like purpose to create travel opportunities for people of color. And Zim didn't grow up, privileged. She's an incredibly intelligent African-American woman who traveled through opportunities that she was able to find, studied abroad on fellowships. And she was getting a lot of her friends saying, well, it's too expensive, and all these excuses that people have. She wanted to create this opportunity to say, like, no, you too can travel. I've been transformed through these opportunities and things have happened to me. I want to give this opportunity to you. Much like I'm sharing in these stories, like I want people to have. She was able to flip that and start a business to then create this inclusion opportunity for people of color so they could travel, which is kind of this whole thing for me of like those aha moments that when you travel, whether it's that person who stumbles upon some textile company in Thailand and now they have a bag company or whatever it is, it's like when you don't look for it, sometimes it just shows up.
Yeah, I agree with you. But let's talk about that just for a second, because I think it is important to touch on what you said about the reasons why people think they can't travel. Some of them are self-imposed barriers. I can't do it. I can't leave. I can't take time off. All the I call it the yeah, but syndrome. But there are some very real barriers to entry for people traveling, and it is affordability for some people. Some people can't, or they really, because of where they are in their life, they really do think, I cannot afford to take this step to travel. What do you say to that? Because I know you're involved in some things that are helping, or they really can afford it. They couldn't even fathom going somewhere because of where they grew up in the world.
Yeah. Awesome question. I think there are a couple different areas we're going to talk about with that question, because it's so awesome. So there's three main reasons that I've identified why people don't travel. One, time. Oh, I don't have the time. Nobody's going to have the time, right? Get rid of that conversation. Oh, it's too expensive, right? First off, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of budget travel websites. We're going to come back to this in 2 seconds, right? And the third is there's nobody to go with. So as far as the last one, there are countless articles that say solo travelers are smarter than other people because they've figured it out. Now, I'm a big advocate of solo travel. That being said, especially where we are currently in the world, I'm a bigger advocate of shared travel experiences as a way to reconnect with community. Going back to point number 2, it's too expensive, because I play in that sometimes. Oh, I can't do this. So
fear. It's fear. It's real fear.
Fear. It's lack. It's a lot of different things I'll bump up against, right? Oh, I don't have the job, so I'll do this, whatever that is. One thing I will say, and I'm a perfect example of this, is the great saying is, everything's waiting for you on the other side of your comfort zone, right? But travel, especially, the magic you're waiting for and the thing that you want is probably going to happen to you when you are traveling. One of my greatest things I used to tell clients when I was an agent was, you want a job, go out of town. Step away from what you're looking at. So in regards to it's too expensive, there are a lot of wonderful options and things. I had the privilege to be part of Hostel International. They have a travel scholarship fund. And for 2 years in a row, I helped their campaign just in the Santa Monica hostel. It's a national campaign they do. The one year we gave away 12 scholarships. And those are scholarships anywhere between, I think it was 18 and like almost 28.
Wow.
Cutoff might be different. And that was, a stipend. So they would apply. We had hundreds, if not thousands of people apply of here's where I want to go. Here's what I want to accomplish. Here's why I want to go. And I'd say majority of these people were from lower means or people who had never traveled before. Maybe they've been a few places, but maybe they've never been anywhere before. Mm-hmm. And so this was that gateway opportunity to help people. And that is, again, back to my core. How do we encourage, inspire, and support? And so working for someone like Hostel International and their travel scholarship fund really just warmed my heart with everything I want to do. I want to be able to support that person that they think maybe they can never travel, but the reality is that we can help find ways to get people out there. Scholarships, there are tons of travel scholarships, especially now coming through COVID, to help people get out into the world, especially for even travelers of color, to want to create this bigger opportunity of inclusion. Because the more we travel, the more we meet people, the more we realize how fulfilled and how wonderful the journey truly is.
I agree. And I think the content that you're creating is so wonderful because it's, if travel feels like something that it's unattainable for somebody, then they get to hear these great stories and basically virtual travel until they can, and hear all these resources and then feel inspired to take that step. Like, okay, I could do it. Like, if I can hear about all these people doing it who maybe didn't have ways to do it, then I can do it too. So you're actually giving education and helping people understand it can happen. It doesn't have to be something that you just dream about. It's a reality.
Yeah.
Which I love.
One of the recent guests I had on my podcast was a gentleman named Khalil Kinsey. His family has the Kinsey collection, the largest privately owned African-American art collection. Mm-hmm. But he said something that I still really love. He said, travel is the greatest gift that you can have and provide for yourself. Mm-hmm. And he's like, that's what I'm constantly telling younger people. And, one thing I created these steps of how to travel with meaning, and they've really helped shape themselves even coming through COVID. But one of the big things I wanted to share with you is that when we say travel, people sometimes think that means you have to get on a plane and you have to go overseas or you have to go somewhere far. Now, I'm a huge fan of that stuff, but the reality is that not all journeys are measured in miles. And the truth is that it's part of the inner journey, outer adventure. And the journey can be anything from an afternoon drive. It could be a walk around the block. It could be choosing to go a different way home. Whatever it is, how you choose to look at things are all part of your travels and your journeys and what you want to look from it. Now, if you're that person that has never gone anywhere and you're kind of just dipping your toe in the shallow end, maybe that is like a weekend away. Maybe that is like an afternoon, and then you just build up to it. Maybe you don't want to just buy the ticket and just cannonball in the deep end. Maybe you do. But it's being open to whatever that can be to realize it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's about going with the openness.
I agree with that. I think that's super important, especially now too, when COVID happened, people couldn't fly clearly for many reasons. And so people were finding these alternatives to go out on the open road. And I know you especially went on a few road trips and then you launched something really cool. So we have to talk about that out of this experience called road trips.
Road trips with meaning. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I launched this with a good friend of mine named Jack Stewart. Jack is the co-host of the Emmy Award-winning show Rock the Park. He and I actually met on a shared experience trip to Israel 2 years ago, and it's been part of Travel Talk. I guess 4 months into COVID in 2020, I had taken a solo road trip just out to the Eastern Sierras, just as I need some fresh air. I need to go experience. It was great. I jumped in a bunch of lakes, did a couple, went to a couple of hot springs, had some great hikes, and then did that every couple of weeks, went to different places. And I started hearing from different people in the community, where should we go? What should we do? And started this conversation of, well, I could just give you ideas, but I want to also make this, a wonderful conversation that you can gain something from. And what I also started hearing is we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. And to even go full circle on this whole thing is when I was on that My Grateful Journey trip to Australia, I connected with a company called Travelers Auto Barn, which was it's a camper van rental company. I had a station wagon with them for 30 days in Australia in exchange for doing social media. It was
Gotta get those plugs.
Well, I'll say this was like nobody was doing this, but
right.
What I wanted to create with this road trips with meaning was giving people this opportunity to go camping that might not normally be used to it or have the equipment or skills or know-how. And so we've created this van life experience for people where everyone is in a camper van. The camper vans have a queen size bed. The camper vans have refrigerator. They have running water. They have a stove. So keeping it COVID safe, everyone cooks their own meal, even though we've also partnered with a catering company. So you have a menu of food to choose from that is basically made. You just heat it up and you have some of the options to make it yourself, which is super empowering as well.
Yeah.
But the whole conversation of really creating these road trips with meaning was that Jack, my adventure guide, is taking you through these discovery programs in places in the wild. First trips we're doing are at a Joshua Tree. And I'm helping with more, not only just logistics, but also creating like a gratitude circle every morning and really finding people to create these conversations of things and places maybe that they were just uncomfortable with. We want to be there to help them step into nature because truly nature is the best therapy.
It is. And it really heals. And it's nice too, because you didn't just you're not just telling them where to do it. You're creating a real experience. It's an immersive experience, spiritually, physically, outdoor wise. I love what you've done with it. And I saw an article several years ago before we went into actually COVID, into our lockdown, that said that the research was showing, I think it was a Gallup or it might've been Pew, I can't remember which research, but they were saying people are looking to invest their money more in experiences than they are things.
Right.
And so that's what you've provided people with this.
Yeah. And to very much so. And to the other thing I said is so many people in this past year spent time alone, right?
Oh God. Yeah.
So many people. And so part of the reason Jack and I wanted to create this is we wanted to create small group curated experiences to build community. To bring people together, to share these experiences together, because one, it's a great way to meet new people who are like-minded. Two, when you're around other people and you're hearing these authentic conversations, you're saying things and doing things that maybe you don't normally do. On one of our trips, we had a couple, and I've known them for years. Maybe I've talked to the guy a couple times, but he was so talkative. Even his partner was like, I've never heard him this way. But being around a campfire and being in nature, he said, he's like, I don't know. There's something that happened. I just felt free. I felt like I was myself.
I love that.
So part of these road trips and part of even a bigger thing that I've created is that, again, it's back to this whole central theme of meaning, that we could have different experiences, but like it means something to us. Like, listen, you've been to the mountains, you've been to the desert, right?
Sure. Yeah. I've been everywhere.
You've had some incredible travel experiences. We should turn the table on you here.
Yeah.
But I also created these like little patches, right? Like I was a Boy Scout. So these are little merit badge patches because I believe that everyone has a story that goes with it.
They've got different nature things on them.
They do. So we have the mountains, we have the desert, we have the ocean, we have open road, and then we have just the general compass.
Yeah, I love that.
Right?
That's a great logo.
And that really being the fact that, I was an Eagle Scout. I was a Boy Scout. I love the patch, what it signifies. But I believe that these patches are also like a representation of like what you did, what you accomplished. Where does your meaning come from?
Right.
And, tell me where your meaning comes from being in the desert.
I concovered that one. I conquered that meaning level. Yay. Yeah. I love that. I think that's so awesome, Michael. And it's not surprising to me that you've been able to pull people out of their shells and get them into these experiences. It's so needed right now. After the year and a half we've had, we only have a little bit more time here. So let's touch just a little bit about how COVID affected what you were doing and how you were able to help transform, this really painful experience of people being isolated and alone and not being able to go anywhere. Like you said, even outside, people were afraid to go outside for a while in their own neighborhoods.
Yep.
What did you do through Travel with Meaning to help people cope with that besides this road trip experience?
You use the word transform, so I want to make sure I do mention that I'm an active member of the Transformational Travel Council. And I want to share the simple fact that over this past year, especially during COVID, I've been incredibly just honored and grateful that they have like weekly calls from people from around the world. And it was really helpful to connect with people that way. And I want to share with that because travel inherently is transformational, and I'm grateful for that travel community.
Great.
Myself, what I did within Travel with Meaning was just aggressively continue to do podcasts. I put out the podcast as a way to push people to share past travel stories that spark that nostalgia, so we could find the things that continue to keep us positive, and then also talk about where these places we want to go in the future. Mm-hmm. What do those future travels look like? Which I found were really helpful. And one of the other big things I did during COVID was I launched a travel game show.
Yeah.
I launched a travel game show called Where Is This? Mm-hmm. And I really started playing it again, sort of selfishly from the standpoint of this kept me inspired and positive. And what I found was every guest who was playing was like, that's the most fun I've had in weeks or months, wherever we were in COVID. And it just took on a life of its own. And we're now in the playoffs after 22 episodes, we're down to 4 contestants, where we have an incredible prize of a trip for 2 on uncruise around the San Juan Islands.
Wow.
It's just been fun, and finding ways to keep people inspired through the possibility of what travel does.
Wow, I love it. So we'll tell people at the end of this where people can find you, and all of those links to everything that you're doing will be on the World on Purpose episode page, and obviously on your website too. But in closing, then, that's great. I didn't even know you were doing that game. How did I not know that? You were like a few blocks from my house.
I don't know.
Okay, I need to know about that one.
You do.
I want to be on the next game set. Because it's been such a difficult year and a half, and we've all had to find creative ways to stay inspired and not be down, and think about, when we get to go out there again, what would you give? 2 things. One, would you give as a word of wisdom to people who are really trying to find their path and their purpose and their meaning in life? One, when they're feeling like you weren't sure what it was. And if they're on it, they're struggling, they're not really sure how to stay on it. What would you give them, that one piece of advice? And then 2, about traveling, how would you have people start dipping their toe out there besides your road trips with meaning if they're afraid?
Yeah. Great questions. And they sort of kind of go together even. As far as if people are afraid, I think just recognize that. And I think that's part of the initial kind of healing, is to recognize you're afraid and know that that's okay. Mm-hmm. And to do your best, whatever that's going to look like. Maybe that is a longer walk. Maybe that is that half an hour road trip that you weren't experiencing. Do where you feel comfortable and push yourself just a little more, and recognize that. Take that moment to be present. And the 5 steps I've created of how to travel with meaning, the number one thing is to be present to that magic of travel. So recognize that for yourself, that I didn't want to go an hour from my house and I went 3 hours. Acknowledge yourself. Mm-hmm. Be open to that. So do that. And on the second side of that, finding that meaning for yourself and what that is I want people, and this is like my bigger ask and everything, is I want people, when you do find something, especially coming through COVID, when, years in the past, we took travel and the ability to freely roam, we took it such for granted. Mm-hmm. So what I want, and really invite people to look at in the years going forward, is to really be present to now where we're going in this new normal of travel. And when you feel something move, touch, inspire you, I want you to share it. I want you to share it, whether you're in conversation or if you're going to put it on social, because somebody probably will. Tag Travel with Meaning. I want people to take on this lifestyle. And part of my whole big thing here, Alyssa, is that I know Travel with Meaning is bigger than me. It's bigger than Mike Schibel. It's not my brand. It's the brand that I have birthed, that I want people to take on what the feeling and meaning of travel is. Mm-hmm. I want them to find their own meaning. And so to really answer your question, I can't answer that to people except keep going, keep doing, keep looking. Use these steps of being conscious, being present. Not all journeys measured in miles. Nature's the best therapy. Mm-hmm. Learn, grow, do all these things that you can, respect, that really are part of the bigger conversation to help you travel with meaning.
Thank you. I just think that's so wise. And you know what? I love that not every journey is measured in miles isn't just about actual travel. That's actually about your own work journey, your spiritual journey, your relationships, like everything you do. That's so profound to me. And I love that phrase that you use.
Thank you. Well, I will say, interviewing probably, I guess it's close to 85 people now from live shows and podcasts. I hear so many central themes. There's an organic conversation you hear from every guest. One is about the journey, right? And the growth and their own spiritual journey as part of the journey, inner journey, outer adventure. And then two, it's keep going.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of your listeners, and I know you and I have talked about whether it's imposter syndrome or any of these things. Mm-hmm. There's things we bump up against. And I have, so many things I'm trying to figure out with Travel with Meaning, but I believe in this ability to have travel stories heal people and to help people and connect people and bond people, that I'm an advocate for it. How do I make this work with a consistent revenue stream? That I'm still trying to figure out from day to day. That I'm still looking at, and I'd love for any of your listeners who have the means and believe in the power of travel. If they want to help, and whether it's from the e-commerce side or for whatever it is, let's get involved, because one thing I will say is there is a renaissance and reemergence of travel happening.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I believe so wholeheartedly that now is the time to not only be responsible from a standpoint of being smart how you travel, but also from a heart-centered, meaningful, conscious way to travel. And how do we take all of this and share it with the world? How do we put our outward-facing lens to say, how do you travel with meaning? And that's what I'm here to do, and want to find the right people to partner with and help. Because again, I know this isn't just about me. This isn't my brand. My goal is to birth it and say, go out to the world.
That's great. I love it. Well, that's a perfect place. Unfortunately, we have to stop, which I could interview you. I say this, I find such amazing people, and you experience this on your show too. It's like, how do you fit it all into one show? It's too hard. It's too hard, but you've given such great wisdom, and we are on a new renaissance. People are trying to figure out now how we're going to be out in the world again in so many ways, from small to very big. And I think you and Travel with Meaning are going to be able to help people do that, Michael. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
So much.
Before we go, I always like to have you tell people where they can find you. And then obviously all your info will be on our At a World on Purpose episode page too.
Yeah, thank you. First up, Alyssa, I really want to acknowledge you again for what you're doing and the conversation of A World on Purpose and the reason behind purpose and what you're doing and your belief and your just sincere gratitude and appreciation for what others do. So just
Thank
huge
you.
kudos to you. You can find me at travelwithmeaning.com. You can email me at mike@travelwithmeaning, Travel with Meaning on all our social channels. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. Like I said, if something moves, touches, and inspires you, use the hashtag Travel with Meaning, tag us. I would love to hear your travel stories. Alyssa, one of my biggest problems, and I use that so loosely, the word problem, my biggest challenge has been that so many people hit me up because they want to be on the podcast or they want to share their story. Yeah. Because quite frankly, with travel stories, everyone wants to be heard, which I love.
Right.
I don't have the time, or honestly, my own thing is I don't have the patience for all of it. And I'm just being honest, but I want to hear your stories, meaning that if you have it, share it, because as much as it's for me, it's for you to share it, and it's for somebody else to hear it and for them to be inspired. Right. Travel stories have the ripple effect. So it's the beauty of somebody listening to somebody else's story that you had no idea that impacted you, somebody else, to go on a trip or to look at something completely different. So please share these experiences.
Right. I agree with you. You're welcome. Are you done?
I don't know. Probably not.
I don't know. Maybe this is going to keep going.
Maybe.
Well, I think that's true. That's awesome. And obviously, as much as we may have a love-hate relationship with social media, it exists for a reason. Everyone uses it. So why not use it as a vehicle for good? Everyone, thank you so much, Michael Schibel. I love everything you're doing in your life and who you are. And Travel with Meaning has always inspired me. And I'm going to be getting myself out there soon. Like, I used to have a bag that was packed, ready to go, like on a fly. I could go in a minute. I wouldn't even know how to do that again now. So I might need repacking lessons, and I'll be calling you up. But thank you so much for being on my show. And it just is an honor to have you here. You are adorable, wonderful, kind, passionate, smart. And you've really created an awesome community around travel. And I think people will want to be a part of it. So thank you for being here today with me.
Truly honored. Honestly, just grateful to be a messenger of this conversation.
Great. Me too. And everyone, please, as Michael said, he told you where you can find him. And I say it again, you can find him on the episode page on A World on Purpose as well, and all of our social channels. Thank you so much for tuning in every week the way you do to learn about purpose and about living a purpose-driven life, finding your purpose, seeking your purpose, sharing your purpose. Now you get to learn about how you want to travel with meaning, which I think is fantastic. I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thank you for taking this journey into a world on purpose with our incredible guests. To learn more about our amazing guests and their inspiring purpose-driven work, please go to aworldonpurpose.com. Don't forget to look at our call to action of the week to mobilize your desire for purpose into action. A World on Purpose can be found on Apple Podcasts and all the major podcast platforms, and the video version can be found on YouTube. If what you heard today inspires you, please write a review and like and share on the platform of your choice. We'd love to also hear from you and learn your pivot to purpose and the meaningful work that you do that lifts humanity. Send your stories to info@aworldonpurpose.com. I'd like to thank our World on Purpose team for making this show a reality. Once again, I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris. Thank you for tuning in to A World on Purpose. I look forward to seeing you soon.